Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at part 34 from the Hercules story from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. Now this part is called the 11th labor, the golden apples, right? And it's talking about the apples from the garden of the Hesperides. So we finally let the 10th labor go, right? You're going to see he's brought the oxen back and now we're on to bigger and better things. Before we dive into the translation and the actual story though, I would always encourage you, whenever you start a new chapter, a new part of the Ritchie story, you want to make sure you have the vocab under control. So if you can find a commentary that has a list, there's a bunch of them out there you could find, or make your own. Just start by making sure you have the vocab. It's very difficult to read and understand what's happening if you just don't know what the words mean. So that should always be your first stop. Then if you can kind of do a little pre-reading and get some of the grammar down where you notice different grammar forms, brush up on that. That would always be a great idea. But the most important advice I would give you, and I say this in all my videos, is read the story aloud, right? Don't just read it in your head. If you can find a classmate, if you're a student, read it to them, practice your speaking, your pronunciation, and if your classmate can read it back to you, that way you can practice your listening skills. These are things that really, really help. I know I say it a lot, but it's true. You're not giving yourself the best chance to understand the Latin if you're not speaking and reading and hopefully listening to this as you go. You don't want to shut off those parts of your brain. Those might be the parts that really help you unlock Latin. So you always want to start there, okay? The other advice I'd give you is try the read and reread method. So when you feel like you got the vocab, pretty good little pre-reading on the grammar, read through the story, right? And keep a list of any words, phrases, anything you don't understand. Read the story all the way through. When you're done, look at your list, try to look up all the words. That's the easy part, right? Looking up the vocab. The grammar, try to see if you can make sense of what was going on. Maybe you're like, oh, this was perfect tense, I didn't see it, whatever, right? Make a list of the grammar, brush up on it, and then read the story again. Those second, third, fourth reads as many times as you need to, those are really critical because that's how you really master this stuff and get the practice and repetition that you need. And you should hit a point where you're able to read this without needing any vocab help or a grammar commentary or anything like that. Once you hit that spot, that's how you know you're in a really good place and you can probably move on. Okay, so if you haven't done that yet, go do it. I'll assume that you have so we can move forward in the video. When you go through or watch as we go through this together, as long as your translation is somewhere in the ballpark of what we're doing here, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not saying mine is, but this should be a roadmap to help you feel really confident, like, yeah, I understood it and I'm ready to move on, okay? So let's dive in. It goes like this. You have Eurystheus postquam boves geriones accepit, laborum undecimum Herculi imposuit, graviorem quam quo supra naravimus. Okay, so it's saying Eurystheus, right, the king, after he received accepit, he accepted or received the oxen of Geryon, right, the 10th labor. He imposuit, he put on Hercules, right, Hercules, the dative, because he's giving this labor to him. So he put on Hercules laborem undecimum, the 11th labor or 11th labor. Okay, and the labor is described as graviorum, so more grave, right, more serious, more difficult almost than those, right. You have the comparative here, so more grave than those which naramumus we have told supra, above, right. We've told before. Okay, so this is the most difficult one by far, is how Ritchie lays it out. Okay. And it goes like this. You have mandavit enim, ei ut aurea poma ex horto Hesperidum offeret. So you're saying he mandawit, he ordered, right? For he ordered him, right? That's who he ordered, Hercules. Then you have the ut clause here, which is an indirect command because you're going with mandawit, right? That's why you have offeret, the imperfect subjunctive. So one way to translate this is you could say he ordered him to bring back, or you might say he ordered him that he might bring back, auferet, however you want to translate that, you're getting in the right place either way. The things he's bringing back, the direct objects, are the aurea poma, the golden apples, okay? The golden apples from the horto Hesperidum, the garden of the Hesperides, right, the nymphs. So this is the famous story of the golden apples. Then we continue. You have Hesperides autem, nymphae erant, quaedam forma praestantissima, quae in terra longinqua habitaba, et quibus aurea quaedam poma a Iunone commissa erant. So the Hesperides, moreover, right, however you want to do it, autem, they were nymphae, they were nymphs, and they're quaedam, they're certain nymphs, right? You have the indefinite there. There's certain nymphs. Here you have the ablative. You can almost translate it as of the most outstanding, praestantissima. You have the superlative there, forma, beauty, right, or form. It's probably the ablative of quality, you could say, describing them. So you could say they were nymphs with the most outstanding, but of kind of probably works a little bit better here, okay? So there's very beautiful nymphs is the idea, right? And they're nymphs who habitaban, who were living or who lived in terra longinqua, right, in a far-off land, Okay, and to whom quibus, the aurea, the quaedam aurea poma, certain golden apples, that's your subject, commissa erant, had been entrusted a Junone, by Juno, right? So the story is Juno has given them the job of guarding these golden apples, right, in the garden. Then you have multi homines, auri cupiditate inducti, haec poma offere jam antea conati erant. So you're saying many men, inducti here is your perfect passive participle, having been lured is kind of one way to do it, right? And induced or lured in by the cupiditate auri, by the desire of gold, right? Because they're golden apples. So many men, conati erant, they had tried to aufere, to carry off haec poma, these apples. And they'd done it before, antea, right? So many men had now tried to do this before, okay? And then we have res tamen difficilima erat, namque hortus inquo poma erant muro ingenti undique circumdatus erat. Right, we'll pause it there. So you have, many had tried rather. However, res difficilima erat, it was the most difficult thing, right? There you have the superlative. So it was an extremely difficult thing for the garden, the hortus, in which the poma erant, in which the apples were, right? Circumdatus, it had been surrounded, circumdatus erat, it had been surrounded on all sides, undique, by a mura ingenti, by a huge wall, right? So it's a giant wall kind of blocking off the garden. Then we have praeterea, Draco, quidam cui centum erant capita portam horti diligenter custodieba. So besides, or moreover, praeterea, right, a certain, I would probably say serpent for Draco. If you want to go down dragon, that would be, funny in its own way. Feel free to call it a dragon. I think it's more like a snake, a serpent, right, the Draco. So a certain dragon, I just did it, a certain serpent rather. Then you have cui here. It literally means like for whom there were centum capita, 100 heads, but you could probably translate it more easily as who had 100 heads, right? So there's this monster serpent. Diligente custodieba was sort of diligently guarding the portam horti, the gate, or the entrance of the garden, right? The gate of the garden. So it's guarded, so you can't just get in there. Okay, that's why it's a labor. Then you have opposigitor, quod Euristius Hercules impera verat erat summae difficultatis, non modo ob causas quas memoravimus, sed etiam quod Hercules omnino ignorabat, quo in loco hortus ille situs esset. Okay, so sort of a longer line here. But you're saying the work or the labor, therefore, which Euristius impera verat had commanded for Hercules, right, or commanded to Hercules, right? He told him to do. Remember, imperare takes the data there. So it commanded Hercules. It was summae difficultatis. It was of the greatest difficulty, right? So it was extremely difficult. Not only on account of the causas quas memoravimus, on account of the reasons which we mentioned, right? It's got the walls and it's got the serpent guarding it. So not only because of those reasons, sed etiam, but also because Hercules, omnino ignorabat, he was entirely ignorant, right? Or he had no clue, right? Entirely unknowing in what place, in quo loco, right? In what place the hortus ille, right? That garden, situs esset, right? So you have this subjunctive here. In what location that garden, you could say, was located, right, is kind of one way to do situs esset there. Esset's just the imperfect subjunctive. So it's not only the fact that he's been told to go to the garden and it's guarded by high walls and the snake, but he literally has no clue where to go, right? So that's setting up the famous kind of story, and Atlas is going to be involved in how he finds this garden, and it's setting up the next few chapters as we work through the Hercules story. Okay, so hopefully that translation made some sense, matched what you had. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'm happy to help you. But otherwise, like I always tell you, keep practicing, keep reading, and you want to hit a point where you can do this without too much trouble. That's always your sort of your flag that you're on the right track, and you can feel good about moving on. Okay, otherwise, just practice and good luck with it.